Hello, my name is Mark Lanier, and if you're watching this video, then you are someone that you love and care about. Has gotten some news that the disease mesothelioma is present. That's horrible news, and I want you to know before I say anything else that my heart goes out to you. What you're suffering or what your loved one is suffering should not have happened to anyone at all. This is not some disease that's a freak of nature. This is a man-made created hazard that people knew about and chose to subject the unknowing, the unwary, those who have no knowledge about it whatsoever, chose to subject them to the chances of getting this disease. And so as I talk to you about it today, and as I visit with some friends about it, and you get to watch our visit, I want you to know the tragedy is not lost on us. And if I could come actually into your home right now and speak to you, the first thing I'd want to do is shake your hand or hug your neck and tell you how very sorry I am, and tell you the information that we've got that may help you through this time or help those you love through this time, because that information is critical. There are some things that time requires you do quickly and that you do right. And those are the things that I can best help you with by talking to you about them today. In the human body, we have certain different kinds of cells. One kind of cell we have are called mesothelial cells. And these are not cells of the lung itself. Some people think mesothelioma is lung cancer. It's not. The mesothelial cells form a wrapper around the lungs. The way the human body's been made is amazing. And when we breathe in or we breathe out, our rib cage expands. And as our rib cage expands, the lungs are getting bigger and smaller. If the lungs were up against the rib cage, it would hurt. It would hurt terribly just to breathe because of the friction, the rubbing. So what we have is what looks like a piece of saran wrap. It's a real oily, clear film that wraps around the lung. So as the lung expands and gets bigger and rubs against that rib cage, it actually has this oily protection around it. And that oily protection allows you to breathe without any pain. You don't even notice it. Those cells are called mesothelial cells. When you get a cancer that's around that lining of the lung, or you've got the same lining around the tummy area, the abdominal area, it's called the peritoneal area. When you get a cancer in that lining, those mesothelial cells have a cancer called mesothelioma. It is a horrible cancer. It's not one that's very treatable. One of the ways you treat cancer most readily is through, for example, drugs, chemotherapy. But drugs go through the blood system, and there's no real blood supply to this part of the body. The reason it's clear and cellophane and see-through and it looks like a saran wrap is because there are not blood vessels there. There's no blood to give it color. And so you can't give someone chemotherapy drugs that would go through the body system and attack this cancer. So you've got a cancer that starts there, and it takes this cellophane, oily cellophane, and it turns it into a hard, crusty growth that eventually stops you from breathing. It invades your lungs, it invades your stomach, and it is a terrible disease that will waste you away. Mesothelioma has one cause, and one cause only, and it's asbestos. We actually have the largest asbestos library, museum, of anybody that we know of in the world at this point. But in our asbestos museum, we have a lot of products as well as advertisements and actual samples of asbestos, all hermetically sealed so that we can't get any type of exposure to them as we sit here. But asbestos itself is a rock that's found in the earth. And it's a rock that's been around for thousands of years in use. It's an incredibly useful rock from one perspective, and that is you can't destroy it. You can take this rock and crush it up and use the fibers. You can take those fibers and put them into cloth, and the cloth can't be destroyed. You can take those fibers and put them into concrete, and the concrete is more stable and it won't burn. You can put it into brakes, and the brakes on a car will last longer because the asbestos can't readily be destroyed. This is a fiber that, because it can't be destroyed, if you breathe it into your body cannot destroy it either. So what the fiber does is it goes down into the very deepest parts of the lungs, and if you get small enough pieces that happen to pierce into the lung itself, they can go through the lung into that pleural lining that we talked about. Or if you eat and ingest asbestos, it can even do the same in the stomach area, into the peritoneal mesothelial cells we talked about. If that asbestos fiber, that's microscopically small at this point, it takes an incredibly sensitive microscope to even pick up these small fibers. If those fibers get embedded in your lung in the wrong way or in the lining, and they pierce the DNA structure, it can cause this abhorrent cancer, this terrible cancer. And the saddest part about all of this is, I've got a chunk here of asbestos, but the asbestos fibers that cause this disease are so small, you could have them in incredibly dangerous quantities in this room and never be able to see them. They're so small you can't see them with the eye. They're so small they have no odor. You cannot smell them at all. You can't taste them. You can be breathing in this asbestos in a way that will kill you without ever knowing it's happening. From the time you get the asbestos exposure to the time you develop mesothelioma, it can be as quick as 15 years, but more typically it's 25, 30, even 45 years later that you get the cancer. The earliest that anyone got it that science is aware of came from a poor infant child outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, whose father was trying to make ends meet and would bring home the burlap bags asbestos came in, and the mom made curtains for that infant that were right over the baby bed out of those burlap bags. And that baby inhaled the asbestos, and that baby got mesothelioma just in the early teenage years. So it can be fairly rapid. There are a lot of jobs that give heavy asbestos exposure, especially in the industrial areas. A lot of the jobs we see involve homemaking as well, construction of homes, dealing with drywall, dealing with roofing tiles, dealing with floor tiles, dealing with plumbers. We see electricians get a lot of exposure because asbestos was put into cabling and wires. The typical trades that show it are people who worked around insulation, because many insulation products had it. And please understand, you get the exposure not simply because you're working with the insulation. If you're working near people who are doing the insulation work, asbestos fibers float in the air for 8 hours. Asbestos fibers can float hundreds and hundreds of feet from where they're actually released. But we see people exposed in almost all of these trades. We see them exposed not only in the insulation trades, but if they worked around ships, if they worked around power plants, if they worked around generators, if they worked around any type of machinery. Most machinery in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even earlier, 40s and 30s, the machinery was heavily laced with asbestos. So we see the exposure everywhere from people who were working. Some of the most insidious problems also happen on the totally innocent people that were nowhere near the work site. During World War II, during the Korean War, during the Vietnam War, most U.S. Navy ships had a good bit of asbestos in them. It was in the insulation, it was in some of the power plants, it was in some of the gaskets, it was in a number of different places. And so folks who were exposed to the disease or to the asbestos during their military time frequently come up with the disease mesothelioma 20, 30, 40 years later. And it doesn't matter that you were only exposed for a year or a month or a week. There is good scientific data that indicates you can be exposed for a day and get mesothelioma, and it's there. There's a whole group of people that have mesothelioma from what's called secondary exposure. It's called that because the primary person to get it may have been a man, it may have been a woman, but generally a man who's working in industrial areas who brings the asbestos home on their clothing. And those with secondary exposure are most typically either the women who would be at home and would shake the dust out of those clothes before they did the laundry, or it would be the children. We've had some tragic cases where we've helped and tried cases for adults now. One woman in particular in her 40s, a college professor at an Ivy League school, who got her mesothelioma because her daddy did drywall on homes when she was an infant. And he would come home, and as a 2-year-old girl is prone to do many times, she'd run to her dad when he came home, "Daddy's home," and jump in his arms and bury her head in his shoulder and hug him. And nobody had any knowledge that she was burying her head into clothing that had microscopic asbestos fibers on it that would call her to the doctor and cause her to lose her life in the 40s, leaving her own children. The parents never knew that asbestos was on her clothes. There are a lot of people who have been exposed to asbestos and have no knowledge of it whatsoever. We frequently have clients who say to me, "But I've never had asbestos. How can I have this asbestos disease?" And it's an eye-opening experience for people to realize the many places they've been exposed to asbestos. This is called snowdrift. This is flocking that was put on Christmas trees. And people would buy at the store different types of these flocking materials and sprinkle it to make it look like there was snow on the Christmas tree. This product is solid asbestos. That's what this is. And anybody who used this product inhaled massive quantities of destructive asbestos into their lungs. Here's a classic blow dryer. This is a blow dryer that has within it asbestos that could blow out into your face as you're drying your hair. People don't realize that it was in blow dryers. It was in snow for Christmas trees. It was in thousands of products, in toaster ovens, in toasters themselves, where you might turn it upside down and bang the toaster to get the crumbs out, and out comes asbestos. It was in brakes, joint compounds on the wall, ceiling tiles, roof tiles, siding on houses, floor tiles. It's in gaskets. It's in the drywall of the boards we put on our walls. It's in paint. It's in a number of products that were sanded. It's in grinding wheels, in modeling clay. They put asbestos for some period of time in cigarette filters. They put asbestos in facial tissues. They put asbestos in so many different products, it's hard to even begin to list them. One of the first things that we do is try to help people reconstruct and remember what asbestos products they were actually exposed to. There are a wonderful range of ways we do this. The most common is to sit down with picture books that have pictures of different products that had asbestos exposure. And we've got thousands of pictures of products with asbestos exposure that we're able to go through and jog people's memory. Beyond that, we are always very careful to look at the different workplaces where folks have been, if they've worked in shipyards, if they've been in the military and actually worked, for example, in the Navy on a ship or in some other capacity like that. We're able to go back and pull records that show all of the products used in the various ships at various work facilities. We've represented people in refineries and in industrial complexes all across America, and we've got thorough records of the different asbestos products that were used in those various industrial locations. We've got a number of different job occupations that people may have just had as a summer job decades earlier when they were a teenager working in the summer. And we're able to run through the trades and the types of jobs that they had and find the typical products that people would have been exposed to. We're able to chase down various co-workers. We have some of the best investigators in the world who have been able to find key witnesses that help us understand facts. We found one recently in Abu Dhabi over in the United Arab Emirates through our investigators, because we're able to locate people that can give us the information we need to handle your case successfully. You can go back to the early 1900s and see the medical community that works closely with industry becoming aware of the hazards of asbestos. We've done extensive research in this area. In fact, we have bought the world's largest library that deals with these hazards, that of the Industrial Hygiene Foundation. The Industrial Hygiene Foundation was formed in the mid-1930s in an effort to keep the general public from becoming aware of these disease problems. And it's amazing what companies knew. We have memos, and we've been able to find letters that talk about how much asbestos it takes to hurt someone, and the many different ways. And then the companies would say things like, the less that's said about asbestos, the better. They would try to keep it quiet. We've got companies that talk about, yes, people are dying from asbestos, but they, quote, made a good living off asbestos. They've got to die from something. It might as well be asbestos. We've got memorandums where people are making the point that while someone may be being exposed to asbestos and it may kill them, it's not going to happen until these executives have already made their money and are long retired. So let's keep it quiet. It's a sad comment that there are some businesses that operate for the almighty dollar without regard to safety, without regard to health, and without regard to the consequences of their actions. We see that today in America, maybe like we've never seen it before. There are a lot of good companies out there. There are a lot of responsible companies out there. Don't get me wrong. There are some companies that were trying to fix this problem, but not most. Most of the companies involved in the asbestos issue are simply dirty and put profits over people. It's a tragedy that now is bearing fruit. It's horrible. If you've got mesothelioma, you've got two concerns you really need to address. The first concern is your family. You've got an opportunity to set things right with your family, to provide for your family, and to try and restore some measure, at least, of economic means once this disease has set in and you're not able to do it yourself individually. These companies, they only speak money. And if you do not make the valid claim that legally can be made, there's no one who can hold these companies accountable. That is the only accountability. And when the next asbestos problem faces a company like this, and they've got to make a decision, do we put people or profits first? Actions that you take right now make a difference. This is true in a number of arenas. We see it right now more so than ever in industry with asbestos, but we see it in the pharmaceutical world. We see it in a number of different arenas where companies are having to make choices. Do I tell the truth, or do I hide the truth for money? You coming forward, your willingness to file a claim, your willingness to unleash a lawyer, to rip into a company for its failure to live as a responsible corporate citizen makes a difference in this world. And I urge you to think about that long and hard, please. The goal of the lawsuit is to help your loved one's treatment, not get in the way. We don't pester and bother. We try to fit into your schedule, in your location, at your convenience, so that we're able to give assurance, we're able to give counsel, we're able to proceed with the lawsuit in ways that assist you as you go through your ordeal, not in any way to detract or distract or inconvenience you. That's our goal. We work hard at that goal. And we train all of our lawyers, and not just our lawyers, but our legal assistants, to be sensitive on those issues and to be very careful at how we treat you, recognizing that you're going through something that needs our help and not a distraction. Some clients that we have try to juggle this idea of maybe I should take care of my medical issues first and then take care of the legal issues. And we urge people not to do that for one very simple reason. The issues are too related to each other. Issues of medical problems and issues of medical diagnoses and issues of medical treatment are all important parts of your lawsuit. It's very important for your lawsuit to have real value, that jurors be aware of exactly what process you were going through, what your medical diagnosis was. It's important you have the right doctors look at your tissue who are able to most qualifiedly speak about the kind and extent of your disease. Of course, it's also the lawsuit being pushed that often provides our clients with the money they need for different types of treatment and actually to help take care of some of their medical expenses. But regardless of whether you need the money or not for your medical care,